Hello, I'm Robert, voluntary fact checker and helping you if you're scared of many things. And this time I'm fact checking the clickbait stories about the idea that Ukraine want to invade Taiwan. And people seem to think that Russia's invaded Ukraine, so surely China's going to invade Taiwan. But it's the opposite, and it highlights how risky it would be for China. Now, I did a long video. This is a shorter video to try to hit on the key points. So let's go through quickly. So first of all, Moscow would, the sinking of the Moskva must be a really big object lesson for the Chinese, because Chinese would need tens of thousands of tank landing craft to cross the Taiwanese Strait. It's a very large strait, and it would take hours to cross. It would need lots of Moskvas to protect all its small boats. The Moskva was the flagship that was protecting the other Black Sea ships with 3 layers of modern defences. And Ukraine was able to sink it with 2 small Neptune sea-skimming missiles, skimming below the radar, and another missile that was another drone that was just an observation drone that distracted the Moskva and also gave information to the 2 missiles to help them attack. And then it sunk. It made a big enough hole so that eventually the ship sunk. It was unsalvageable. It's at the bottom of the Black Sea. And then they sunk 12 other ships as well, smaller ships. And so China will not be encouraged by that, because the only way it's going to have to move 1 million soldiers from Chinese mainland to Taiwan by sea. And how is it going to do that faced by so Taiwan has lots and lots of anti-ship missiles, and on boats, on trucks, it's going to be they're going to be attacked by loads of these things if they were to try to cross the strait, and many of their ships would be sure to be sunk. And then the other thing is that China has no previous experience of this sort of thing. Now, Russia didn't either. And this is a Russian phrase: the first blini is always a mess. That's the first pancake. It's apparently always a mess. Certainly it was a case for Russia. It made a huge number of mistakes in its attempt to, and even with lots and lots of practice outside Ukraine, and yet when they crossed, for instance, they ran out of diesel. Their troops didn't even know that whether they were in Donbass or Kiev when they were asked. Some of their soldiers, they were very confused. They didn't expect. They expected to be welcomed by flowers, and they weren't. And it was just real mess. And it would have been also it was its largest combined arms operation. That means where it involves the Air Force as well as the land. But Russia doesn't seem to have learned anything. It was using World War II tactics. It still is at this point, 3 months into the war. Its planes are doing point-to-point missions where the commanders tell them, bomb this target, just like in World War II. They then fly over, they drop the bomb, they fly back, they do it as quickly as possible to try to avoid being shot down by the enemy missiles, enemy planes. And that's what Russia's been doing, and it hasn't been trying to gain air supremacy. It seems it's never been involved in a war that needed that, and they haven't learned how to do it. Which is something that's very elementary, but very basic. I don't mean elementary, difficult to do, but basic for NATO training. NATO could have had air supremacy in a few days, and they expected Russia to do the same, but it seems Russia's never learned how to do that. Well, that wouldn't be China's problem, presumably. We don't know. China has never done. So first of all, let's just quickly look at this. Let's go and look at Russia. So Putin, he for sure, if he could take Putin back, if Putin could talk to himself, as he was on 23rd of February, he would surely say, don't invade. He's only continuing with it because he's doubling down on a big mistake. He's not continuing it because it's a good idea. So if you go to the Chinese, then I look back, the Chinese have only one war, the last war of any size, and hardly a big one, was the Sino-Vietnamese War in 1979, 3 weeks and 6 days. They captured a small city of 200,000 and a smaller nearby town of 10,000, and then 3 weeks later, just short of 4 weeks later, they left. That's it. Now, any soldiers who were alive back then, if you were 20 on that at the time of that war, if you say 18 at the time of that war, you'd be 61 today. So China has very few soldiers from those days, and it may have a few generals who weren't generals back then, but were young soldiers who were part of that war. That could be about it. I don't know if any of them went on to be generals. So that is not experience that is going to mean that China knows how to fight a modern war. And then it claims in 1989 there was a small skirmish where it captured and claimed an uninhabited island. There weren't even any soldiers there, and then there was a small skirmish with Vietnamese boats, and that's it. And those were the biggest ones I can find since the Vietnam War, when China was involved in the 1960s on the opposite side from the United States. And then, if you look even more, try and look at a sea invasion of a well-defended island with millions of people. And all I can find is the Bay of Pigs invasion, sponsored by the CIA from the United States, and the CIA, 1,400 soldiers, I think it was, or something like that, and they tried to depose Fidel Castro, and they failed. It was a big fiasco. And it wasn't even trying to take over Cuba, and that is the biggest one I can find, that anything like a sea invasion of a well-defended island. Apart from that, well, obviously we had the invasion of the Normans, so France, way back in 1066, a date that school children in the United Kingdom all know by heart. 1066, and that was a successful invasion. And there also we had with various levels of England, there were various levels of success. We had the invasion of the Angles and the Vikings, and further back, of course, the Romans, who took England but not Scotland. And but I can't think of any examples, and I can't find anything, obviously, with Google, since the invention of gunpowder, of a big invasion that successfully took a big island. But I expect it has happened. I can't find it. Do say if you know in the video, and I'll say in the video description. But certainly not this century, and I don't know how far back you have to go before you find a successful invasion of an island, or a big island, well defended with lots of people. And China hasn't. So it's not just China has no experience, nobody has experience of this with modern weapons, and they haven't built the boats for an invasion. And then they would have the problems of morale. So the Chinese, I'll leave out the whole one China policy thing. I think many of you will know it already. China have the fiction that they represent both Taiwan and China at the United Nations, and they tell their people that the Taiwanese, if only they weren't stuck in old books, that they would of imperial days, as it were, then they would realize that China is much more modern and much better system. The communism is a more modern and much better system of government, and they would want to be communists. That's what the Chinese basically say to their people. And then if you go to the Taiwanese, of course the Taiwanese, very few want to be communists. They want to be a democracy. And then so you would have ethnic Chinese fighting other Chinese in Taiwan, and with this kind of puzzlement like the Russians had. Why don't they just welcome us? Because we're just deposing an ineffectual, corrupt government, and they should want us there, so they can learn the benefits of modern communism and become a communist country and part of China. So the defenders would have the huge moral advantage that they're defending their way of life, and the invaders don't even understand why they're doing that, and fighting for it. And then the experience of never having waged a war like that, So, and then Taiwan has this asymmetrical defense strategy that it already in 2019. They have loads of anti-ship cruise missiles. Ukraine just fortuitously, it had ordered these, developed these Neptune cruise missiles, I think collaboration with Turkey if I was right, but they only had the first ones just really I think after the invasion started, I'm not sure, maybe before. Anyway, they were quite new, whereas the Taiwanese, they have had these for a long time, very good anti-ship cruise missiles. And the Russian actually had experience of fighting Crimea, fighting Ukraine in Crimea, and then for a long time in Donbass. China's not fighting Taiwan. So they have no experience of this. And they have no combat experience, not even the level that Russia had fighting Ukraine in Donbass. And China is nothing like that with anyone. There are fisticuffs with the Indians because it's a demilitarized zone where they can't use rifles or pistols or guns. And I don't know, they have some other, I think they have some small conflicts somewhere, I'm not sure, but they don't have much. And so the Taiwanese would defend with loads and loads of ships with anti-cruise missiles, which they would only use as the Russians approach. Then they would use loads and loads of mines, which they would put around Taiwan. And then they would also have the ground forces on land, which would fire and attack any minesweepers that the Chinese sent, and they would attack any landing craft with precision artillery and anti-ship missiles again. And the anti-ship missiles would also be on trucks, which would be dispersed throughout Taiwan, through the forests and the mountains, and throughout the wall they would be firing on them. And fast attack boats and these catamarans that can travel very fast and attack catamarans. Catamarans are very fast ships with 16 missiles each, so they can go speeding across the water and they can attack the ships with these missiles. And fast attack boats and truck launched anti-ship cruise missiles and so on. So and then before they would have plenty of time before the Chinese got through all this barrier to lay their beach mines and precision artillery. And this is the actual Taiwanese plan from 2019. My paraphrase of an article about it. And then the Taiwanese have an underground hangars where they actually have 200 fighter jets underground. And this is not Taiwan, I can't find a photo, I think it's classified, civilians are not allowed to visit, but it's a photo of a Swedish underground hangar. So they have not only an underground hangar, they have a whole entire underground base with fuel for the fighters, with engineers to repair the fighters, with a hospital to treat injuries. They have food, water, everything they would have, and it's connected to an Air Force command station, all underground, nuclear bunkers, deep underground. It's like Azovstal, but 100 times over. And then they have an entire underground complex for a city for the government, which is attached by tunnels to all this underground. So Taiwan has built this for decades. They've been building this and expanding it, and it's been there for decades. And so this would be the command center. And there's another one with 80 fighter jets further up the coast, and modern fighter jets, far more modern than MiG-29s, 27s, or whatever they are. And so just like with the Russians, then, but for different reasons, the Taiwanese would surely retain a fair bit of air power, even without. So I find very hard to understand how even without US or Japanese support, how China could really hope to win this war in less than months. It'd be something like the Ukraine war. And then people say, but there are only 170,000 of the Taiwanese soldiers. But I mean, many of the Chinese would die with their million invaders. And then it turns out that Taiwan has 1 million reservists. So it's not really as asymmetrical as it seems. They have 170,000 of their soldiers, of their fully trained, but of their full-time soldiers. And then you have the 1 million reservists who would then come in and join the fight. And then China only has its 1 million soldiers, and how many of those would survive during the attack? So it would be at least reduced a fair bit against 170,000 soldiers plus 1 million reservists. So really, to be effective, China would probably need more than that, maybe 2 million. And then it would be a very long, difficult attritional war, and they would have to try and get the ports, but because the invasion beaches are basically impossible, so they try and attack the ports, but the ports would be so damaged they would then have to repair them. I mean, it's just not remotely credible that, and there's no sign that China's even prepared for this. So they're not going to suddenly do this. There's no way that China tomorrow could invade Taiwan. That would be absolutely daft. Because they would need all the supplies, they would need all the vessels, they would need to build a whole flotilla and load it up with supplies, load it up with tanks, and it would be very, very, very obvious that China was planning to do this. It would take a long time, and then Taiwan would all be ready, and then all ready to attack back, and to do its thing. And the United States supplying Taiwan with even more, and Japan, that's their time to even reinforce Taiwan with even more if they saw clear evidence that China was planning to invade. And then the other thing is, what would China achieve by this? I mean, if they took over Taiwan eventually, then they end up control of Taiwan. They've lost all their soft power. So China cares very much about soft power. So that's one of the last things I talked about. And maybe that's the most important thing. Maybe I can skip some of that. So I talked about it in a longer video. So China, the United States wants soft power, China very much so, and it's very much about the Chinese image, like their saving face kind of idea. They're very much about the image of Chinese and how other countries perceive them. And so China, so from China's point of view, what Russia's done must be very baffling and difficult to understand, because Russia's completely lost face in the world, and it's got almost no soft power left. And China wouldn't understand why would Russia do that. And so from China's point of view, it's definitely not going to be encouraged by that. So people talk an awful lot about the Chinese and say, they would look at the Russian sanctions, say we don't want to be sanctioned. Well, I mean, they've had lockdown, they could survive. They survived lockdown with very little exports, and the rest of the world really was found difficult with that. They could survive the sanctions if they needed to be. It was very important diplomatically. They're a very strong, powerful country. So I'm not sure it's so much the sanctions as the loss of soft power. And because they've spent decades, building up. Russia has lost its empire. It's trying to retake it. China hasn't lost its empire. It's pretty much at the fullest extent of the Chinese empire. All they don't have is Taiwan, and they and possibly South Korea, but that's very dubious as to whether you would count South Korea as part of the Chinese empire, because I think Korea generally. I mean, Korea certainly would dispute that, and I'm not sure the Chinese would think they've got a very strong claim on it. And so the Chinese soft power, and so China is very, very strong in that intellectually, in the understanding of their position in the world. And so the bluffing about an invasion is part of this soft power. So they're basically saying to the world that we are strong. We could take over China or over Taiwan very easily. That's what they're saying. They're saying, but we're a peaceful country, we don't want to harm anyone, we're not going to invade Taiwan because we're peaceful. We're going to do all these mock invasions in the deserts, but in reality we're not going to do it because we're peaceful. But look, we could do it. And here we are practicing it. We could take over Taiwan at any moment, but we're not going to because we're peaceful. We're just going to wait. If we wait for long enough, then Taiwan will become communist, because they will gradually realize how much better communism is than democracy, so they will decide to become communism. So that's basically what China's point of view. But if they were to actually do an invasion, then that would completely give the lie to all that, and they would lose so much soft power. And really, especially if Taiwan was resisting for weeks or months, then how could they continue to say that China is representing Taiwan at the UN? You know, if they had a big war and 3 months later China was still trying to invade Taiwan, and that seems possible even, you know, based on analysis. I don't even know how they could. You look at Azov-style steelworks, and how they managed to last out for nearly 3 months. And then you look at how Taiwan is prepared. I mean, wouldn't they say, you know, it'd be very difficult for China to take them, because you've got the logistics as well, you see. So far more difficult than for Russia, that they have to supply across the Taiwanese Straits, and with all these anti-ship missiles which are going to be there all the way through the war, and they can't get rid of them. So they're going to have very big difficulties with supplying, even in peacetime. Even if Taiwan did nothing, it would still be very difficult for China to sustain an army on Taiwan by shipping all the supplies across the Taiwanese Straits. Now add to that the Taiwanese are sinking those ships. Then how are they going to do it? So, and they can't do it by plane, it's just not feasible. So, and again we've got all the anti-plane weapons. So anyway, so that's why there's no way. So China is not realistically going to do this. And then I just quickly on nukes, that I forgot to do it in this short video, so very quickly. China doesn't have tactical nukes. To use nukes would completely destroy soft power. So there's no way, and it's only got these huge big strategic nukes. They are multi-megaton nukes. They would only use even only after an invasion, to keep them separate from the missiles. There's no way that they're going to use those on Taiwan. Absolutely no way. And then I don't understand why people say that the United States would use, or NATO, if NATO got involved. It's really the United States more than NATO. I don't know why the United States and Australia maybe might get involved. Why would the United States use nukes against China? I can't see any conceivable situation where that the United States would do that either. Instead, they would support with, you know, fighter jets maybe, or their subs, their nuclear subs. They could attack the ships from the Chinese ships, maybe things like that. But I don't see how the with conventional weapons, not with nukes. So nuclear subs just means nuclear powered, and then they can fire conventional weapons, like cruise missiles or whatever. So why would it doesn't make sense. I don't see how, even if this became a big war and the United States and Japan came in and Australia and other countries came in on the Taiwanese side, and they supported them even with their boats and subs and planes, I still don't see how it could escalate and become anything bigger than a very big and horrible and very long bloody war in Taiwan. So and probably counterattacks maybe to anything that's supply lines in China. So certainly if the United States and Japan came in on the Taiwanese side, then the end result is surely Taiwanese independence. So there's really no plus point about this for China, and lot of risk. Whereas to keep pretending it's going to do that, there is lots of positive for that for China. Not so much for they're trying to intimidate Taiwan. There's no way that their intimidations of Taiwan are really going to convince Taiwan to become communist. It's a very minority in Taiwan, very small part of Taiwan that wants to be communist. There's the two possibilities of ones that want to eventually expect China eventually become a democracy, and then Taiwan will join in, or the other ones that want to be independent. And independent is currently winning. So it's not really much they can do about Taiwan, but they can do a lot on the world stage. So they have managed to, they've got this agreement from the United States to recognize the One China policy, recognize China as representing both Taiwan and China in the UN. And so that is basically what this is all about. And it's only if China was to change that One China policy, then we could have two countries. There isn't much that Taiwan can do about it unilaterally, but China could unilaterally if it changed its policy. But for now, China is very strongly that we are part of China. Taiwan is part of China. We could easily invade, but we are a very peaceful country. We're not going to invade. All the rest of the world must recognize us as being representative of both Taiwan and China. So that's why China does all these bluffs and things. So hopefully this now helps you to be much less scared about China, and hope you understand that all these bluffs, they may seem very scary, but they're just part of this soft power, really. It's really to do with soft power, saying, in the sense of saying, we are powerful, we are strong, come and join in with us because we are powerful, in that sense. Not trying to coerce other countries, but just saying, showing that message. And along with all the other aspects of China's soft power. So anyway, hopefully that now helps you be a little bit less scared, and so I'm going to upload this video, and I might try an even shorter one, but it's really, I find quite difficult to do short videos, but I can do it if I really try, so I might try an even shorter, proper short video.